Chapter 8 in our book, Adult Spiritual Development, the journey from unconscious primitive ego to a spiritually awakened adult consciousness. Today we're going to have a little fun. We've been talking a lot in the first 7 chapters about what primitive ego is, how to identify primitive ego, how to learn to pay attention when the knee-jerk emotional energy comes squirting out from our hot button issues. Today we're going to have a little fun. I really enjoy this particular chapter. It's one of my favorites, and that is learning to accept reality. And reality is what is. So some of what we're going to talk about today is going to be a way of helping your adult consciousness, your more evolved, awakened consciousness, which is what I hope you're working on now. This chapter hopefully will give you some strength in that. It'll give you some foundational ways of looking at the world that I think will be quite useful for you. Okay, let's get started. 5 big ideas in this chapter. Number 1, who are we? What is our true self? You know, we hear an awful lot in the literature these days about finding your true self and manifesting your true self. All of those beliefs, however, are based on the sense that we're an I. I'm me. I'm a separate object in the world, okay? Who we are? We're pure observing consciousness having an experience. That's it. That's it. And the only place you can have that experience, right now. If we're focused on the past or if we're focused on the future, we're doing it inside our brain, okay? Because the only reality that exists is this moment and only this moment, okay? So why is that important? It's important because as we awaken and learn to become because free, that's what we talked about in the last chapter, because is all of the becauses that turn our unconditional love into conditional love. Because awakening, we have to be willing to change, and we can change only what we see and what we accept about ourselves. Okay? So if we're walking around convinced that we're an object, that we're a separate self in this interconnected, amazing universe, boy, talk about a bent nickel belief. That is going to be a massive distortion of reality. We are dependent on and interdependent with the entire universe, okay? I could go into that in some detail as I do in the book, but it's the whole philosophy that from the Big Bang on, everything's been interconnected. Everything is interdependent on everything else. So if we're going to change, then we've got to change who we really are. And if we're basically pure observing consciousness, that's our goal. So all the work that is being offered in this book is basically to become a pure observing consciousness or awaken to your true self. Just be who you are, you an observer. You're just paying attention to the world. And in our work, we're paying attention to the inner world also. Okay? So that's kind of a framework of this chapter. Okay, what is spiritual intelligence? How do we move on this journey from primitive ego to a more enlightened consciousness? Well, we have to begin to embrace some wisdom. And the wisdom, if we're going to create a future that people are going to want to live in, including ourselves, then we have to be able to increase empathy, increase a sense of mutuality, that everyone has the right to believe and want the same things we do. And most importantly, we're emptying our ego of all of these bent nickel beliefs and assumptions about the world. We're coming into a sense of grounded in reality. We are awakening, okay, to the fact that we have a lot of becauses. We have a lot of distortions and bent nickel beliefs about what reality is and who we are. So we have to empty ourselves of all that stuff. That's part of the process that we're in, okay? How do we do that, okay? Well, first is a recognition that our narcissistic primitive ego loves to push the river. And what I mean by that, and this is a phrase that I'm hopeful will become a part of your inner language, okay? Because the minute you begin to be unhappy and experience pain or suffering in the world, you're pushing the river. Let me show you why. The river is probably best understood as a metaphor. Picture sitting on the river of life, okay? You're on the bank. It's a beautiful sunny day. And down the river, you see something coming, and you say, oh, wow, that's really great. It might be Christmas, maybe it's a promotion, maybe it's a new house or a new car. And we get all excited, and we try to grasp it. We try to hang on to it. But the river just keeps taking things on through. Why? Because there's only this moment. So pretty soon, that new car is a rusty hulk in the driveway, okay, and it's gone. Our pain and suffering is pushing the river. In other words, we try to grasp those things that we like and want, and we don't want reality or the river of life to take them away, so we hang on to them, and then we suffer. Why? Because everything comes down the river, and everything leaves on down the river. Okay? That's a reality. Second, we're sitting there and we see something coming down the river and we say, oh man, we don't want that. That's illness. That's poverty. Oh man, I lose my job. Oh, my car quit. All of these things coming down. So what do? We try to push them away. We try to avoid them. We try to hold them off, including suffering, by the way. We hate to suffer. The primitive ego just does not like suffering. So it's always pushing stuff away. Well, same problem. We're pushing the river. What we need to recognize is all of that too will come into our lives, but it will also leave. It'll go on down the river. So what are we really saying about reality is that we are strictly and completely an observing consciousness. We're just sitting on the edge of the river watching this stuff come and watching this stuff go. So what's happening is we have to begin to recognize that life is very impersonal. It's not happening to you and I. We're not an object. We're just observers. We're just watching life happen. It's very impersonal. Bad things, good things, things we want, things we don't want, everything's coming down that river and going to be taken away. So life is impersonal. That's one of the first and most important understandings to stop pushing the river. The other is that life happens. Okay? It just flat happens. It doesn't happen to us. It's not an intent to make us unhappy. Now, of course, if our primitive ego thinks we're an object, we're going to be unhappy when negative things come down the river. But if we can accept the fact that life just simply happens, it's impersonal, and we're just observers of it. So what that means is that the only real choice we have is how we're going to react to what the river brings. It's our internal response to it. That's the only real choice we have. Now we're back to awakening, we're back to self-awareness, and we're back to changing ourselves, not the world. Okay? So all the things that we're talking about in this book are basically learning to recognize that this pushing the river isn't going to be helpful for us because it's not reality. Okay? Last big point. Life and reality is only hard on our beliefs and our shoulds. The minute we stop resisting, okay, and pushing away the things that we want to avoid or hanging on to the things that we want to have in our life all forever, life's going to be real hard on us. Why? Because every bit of that stuff is going to be taken on down the river, okay? We are pure observing consciousness. We're standing here, and the only reality there is this particular moment. And if we're suffering, if we're unhappy, if we're depressed, if we're having a bad day, if we're in a bad mood, if we're thinking life is just, a pile of garbage, okay, and we all have those days, then the trick is to wake up and recognize it's impersonal, it's just happening, we're just observing it, and it will leave, and it's only hard on our beliefs, and it's hard on our shoulds and shouldn'ts, okay? So the wisdom that we're really focusing on in this book, and a way to think about this so that it's helpful for you, is to think about the fact that the universe has been doing just fine. It's been working perfectly for 13.7 thousand million years without our ego. Our primitive ego thinks it knows how everything should and shouldn't be, but that's denying the reality that the universe has been doing just fine for a long, long time without our primitive ego thinking it's the ruler of that universe and determining what's absolute truth, what's right, what's wrong, what's good and bad, what should and shouldn't be, okay? So I like this way of thinking about it because it supports all the work we're doing. It's a basic wisdom that supports that work. Evolution, and this is the second wisdom, evolution is change, okay? That's all it is. Without change, there wouldn't be a creation, there wouldn't be a universe. There is absolutely nothing in the known universe that is not under the influence of the evolutionary impulse to become or evolve or change. And that includes you and I. So, changing the self is just working with the evolution, the whole impulse of evolution, which I like to think about as the spirit of the creator. And I don't mean God, I mean just the creator, the energy of this universe, okay, is that evolutionary impulse to become. And what are we doing? What is the becoming? Really simple. I ran out of board here because my whiteboard's a little small. But the basic work that we're doing in this course, in this book, is learning how to empty our ego and become just pure observing consciousness. Okay? It's that simple. When we empty our ego, we're going to tend to be happier because life is only hard on our ego beliefs and shoulds. It's going to want to push the river, hang on to the good stuff, push and avoid the bad stuff. But of course, this grasping and avoiding is going to cause pain and suffering for us. So if we want to be spiritually intelligent, then we have to recognize that these basic wisdoms, okay, are going to help us establish empathy, mutuality, and an emptiness of ego so that we can be more co-creative beings focused on creating the future for our species and for ourselves, okay? So this work is pretty darn important if we look at the world today and a lot of the conflict that's going on. It's all ego-based. Okay, final 2 points. Awakening, become because free. Just get rid of our becauses, empty our ego of them. Recognize that who we are is pure observing ego. We're not a separate I. We're not an object. We're just an observing ego having an experience in this moment. Okay? Now, hopefully, you can have some fun with this chapter. Like I said, it's one of my favorite because it kind of really grounds us in the work of the first 7 and where we're going from here in the following chapters. Okay? Enlightenment is becoming an observing consciousness and learning to embrace what is. That's why enlightened people tend to be pretty happy people. They have really emptied their ego. Okay? Have a good week. We'll see you down the road at Chapter 9.